Recording in progress.
Good morning. I'm going to call to order the Thursday, January 18th, 2024 meeting of the Palo Alto Architecture Review Board. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Balti,
Present.
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Board Member Adcock,
Present.
Board Member Chen,
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is public comment. Do we have any members of the public who wish to address us on any matters not on our agenda?
Yes, we have one raised hand on Zoom from Shani Kleinhaus.
Okay, let's go ahead with that, please.
And Shawnee had asked that I present a short presentation as she speaks, so I'm just pulling that up right now.
So should I start now?
Yes, you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Shani Kleinhaus. I am the environmental advocate for the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I live in Palo Alto and I'm on the PRC, but I speak for Audubon today. This is the presentation about bus shelters and bird safety. Have a little history with the ARB. This is a bus shelter on Arrastradero. As you can see, it's in the Stanford Research Park. And as you can see, it's completely transparent. Next slide, please. A billion birds die each year due to collisions with glass in buildings and other man-made structures. The science shows that it's best to avoid transparent structures. And if you use them, there got to be visual cues for birds. Studies show that dust and graffiti on bus shelters, as unpleasant it is to the eye, actually reduce bird collision significantly. Next, please. These are some shelters at Google. You can see they use cues both for people, those larger cues, and then the thinner lines and the leaf patterns are also used for alerting birds to the existing of the shelters. Next, please. So when I started seeing these transparent bus shelters at the research park, I approached our public works. I didn't know why these were approved. They told me it was VTA. I asked VTA, they said, no, it's Stanford. I asked Stanford and I found out that it was the ARB that actually required them to do this. After a request from Stanford, last year, they retrofitted the existing bus shelters with visual cues, and they promised to implement any new ones with the visual cues. So next slide, please. This is the retrofitted bus station. I don't know if it's visible to you. There are some thin lines in the glass. All the ones that they already installed have these now. Next. So I wanted to just, it's a little pitch here. The VTA does not use glass in bus shelters. It's high cost of installments and maintenance. They use perforated metal or no shelter at all. Palo Alto is currently developing an ordinance for bird safety and dark sky, 1 or 2 ordinances, which will come to you soon. And will likely require visual cues. But I just wanted to remind you that the best solutions to minimize the hazards and not even create them at all, rather than to try and mitigate them. Next. That's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, staff, for facilitating that. Next item on our agenda is agenda changes, additions, and deletions. I have none. Staff, do we have any?
None today.
Thank you very much. Next item is city official reports. Staff.
Yes, thank you so much. 1 second. So just to note that we are planning to cancel the February 1st hearing, but we do expect to have items on the 15th. We're kind of still resolving what that agenda will entail, but we do expect to have a hearing that day. There have been some new projects submitted. Hold on one second. There was a new project submitted at 833 Los Trincos Road out in the open space area for, this is going to be for, it's an accessory structure, but it's a new building and the open space requires a site and design review. And so they are submitting an application that will come forward to the Architectural Review Board. And it's has an attached accessory dwelling unit to that other accessory uses. There is also the project before you today, 1066 East Meadow. And then there was a new project submitted, 3265 El Camino Real, which is the, I think this is the project that was looking to do teacher housing, right? Yeah. I'll update that summary, but it's affordable multifamily, 100% affordable multifamily, but also specific for teacher housing. And then there was a new SB 330 pre-application also submitted along San Antonio Road at 762 San Antonio Road for 198 multifamily residential units. So if you would like to assign an ad hoc committee to any of those.
Wow, yes, we would. So colleagues, we have 4 projects that potentially need ad hoc committees. Let's go through them. The first one on Los Troncos Roads, I don't believe requires an ad hoc committee. Does anyone feel otherwise? It's a residential small project. The second one on East Meadow, that's what we're going to be looking at today. I suggest we wait till we finish hearing from this and then perhaps assign an ad hoc committee to follow up on that. Next one is a rather important housing project. I'd very much like to assign an ad hoc committee to that. Do I have any volunteers? I'm seeing Board Member Rosenberg, Board Member Hirsch. I'd like to assign Rosenberg and Hirsch to that, please. And lastly is the SB 330 project on San Antonio. I would like to be on that subcommittee. Would anyone like to join me?
May I?
Board Member Chen. So Balte and Chen, please.
Great, thank you.
In that vein, I'd like to ask my colleagues that we have 2 other ad hoc committees. One was on 739 Sutter. We heard that project recently, and I had assigned Board Members Chen and Adcock to a subcommittee. I'm hoping to hear back from you on the status of that project. I understand it's been resubmitted. And I'd just like to have our board follow up on that if we could. So this is a gentle nudge to stay on top of that one. Secondly,
Wait,
Can I just add
which,
a,
739 Sutter?
if I could add a quick note, if
Please.
you don't mind. 739 Sutter did resubmit an application. And so I will send that out to you guys to take a look at the revised application. And they did make some of the changes that were requested. Specifically, they did take off all the rooftop decks. And so there are some somewhat substantial revisions that were made for that project. So
And just for clarity, it's board members Chen and Adcock that are, okay.
okay, thank you. And lastly, we have an outstanding ad hoc committee on objective design standards relative to townhomes. And I have in my notes that we'd asked Board Members Chen and Hirsch to report back to us with some proposal for what those standards might be. That was a bit of a homework assignment and we haven't heard anything back on it. And again, a gentle, maybe not so gentle nudge this time, that we'd like to get some progress on that. That's something that the planning department is open to our suggestions on what to do, but they don't have the resources to invest much themselves. But we're finding that it's a pretty important subject. So,
And Chair Balte, could you please clarify for the ad hoc committee what the specific final homework assignment is that we would be looking for?
Sure. As I understand it, they did a bunch of research on townhomes
Yep.
and sort of from a broad perspective, what development standards might be appropriate and useful. And we had asked them to try to formalize that into some actual language of what the standards might be. So it's actually writing out a series of objective design standards relative to townhomes. So
You have a budget for this?
what we're
Just
looking.
kidding, just kidding.
That's right. So we're looking for some stab at what that might be. We would have to coalesce behind it and feel that it's both appropriate and proper for passing it on to the planning department. But we have the opportunity to do that. We have been pushing hard to do that. So we've put that into subcommittee. Yes?
To respond a little bit to
No,
this.
no, I don't want to discuss it now because it's
No,
not
I
agendized.
just-
Okay.
Understand that we were sort of put off when the planning told us that really there's no intention to move forward with something like this. So that's why we sort of stopped at that point.
If you could speak into
Sorry,
your
I
microphone,
can't
Board
hear.
Member Hirsch.
Well, okay.
I just heard you say you were put off when the
Planning, well, we met with the director and he hoped that he would have some positive response, but he did not.
Well, I think we should be careful on that. It wasn't that he had a negative response. It was that there's pressing needs on staff's time. And he didn't feel he had the resources to put into hiring a consultant to develop this kind of thing. Whether or not that's the case, what he did say is if we could produce something, they would look at it at least.
I don't
I
remember.
think
We
we
did
should
keep
produce something.
minutes on that, but
We're
I
seeing
don't
over and over
remember that.
again how important this is.
Okay, well, but in any case, you're right.
And you've
We
done
should-
so
we
much
should
research
sum
on it,
up.
we don't want to drop it.
We don't. It's right. No, you're right.
So with that, I think, where's my calendar here? Okay, then we're going to move on to our study session. So next item is 1066 East Meadow Circle, request for preliminary architecture review to consider the deconstruction of an existing 35,000 square foot commercial building and construction of a new two-story, 46,000 square foot school building. Project will contain classrooms, administrative offices, and a multi-purpose room. Site improvements include parking, a play area, and a rooftop garden. So I remind everyone, this is a study session. We're going to hear from staff. We will hear from the applicant. We will hear from the public, and the board will provide comments and feedback on the proposal. We won't make any decisions or provide any recommendations to the planning department. Okay, staff, could you go ahead, please?
Hi, good morning. My name is Emily Callis and I am the project planner for this project. As Chair Balte said, this is for 1066 East Meadow Circle preliminary review. The proposed project includes construction of a preschool through second grade campus with 26 classrooms and 3 multi-purpose shared spaces for a total of 46,000 square feet. The project includes 3 outdoor areas, including one on the second floor and one on the roof. The site plan includes queuing space for drop-off and pickup and 58 parking stalls. This project is in the flood zone, so it also includes grading a 6-foot platform to elevate the building. The formal application will include major architectural review and a conditional use permit for the school use. Additionally, and I'll discuss it more later in the presentation, to allow a rooftop garden, a zoning text amendment would be required to receive council approval to amend the zoning code to allow a rooftop garden in this zoning district. Additional topics for consideration for discussion are the overall site planning and architectural design, circulation and parking, the height, grade and massing of the building, and the play spaces and rooftop garden. This site context along East Meadow Circle is bordered by the Eichler Swim and Tennis Club to the rear, single-family residential neighborhoods off of Lewis Road and Greer Road, and 1 to 2 story office uses on the circle itself. This property is also zoned ROLM, which is a research office and light manufacturing. The site plan includes a U-shaped building facing the parking lot area. There is a 2-lane wide drop-off corridor, 58 parking spaces, and the play yard shown here is built up at the platform level to have grade separation between the parking area and the play area. This is an overview of the floor plans for the 2-story building with the rooftop garden. One item to note, because this is in the ROLM zoning district, there is a floor area bonus for childcare facilities. And so the portion of this project that is operating as a preschool, that area, which is about 8,000 square feet, is not counted towards the floor area maximum for the site. There is also a bonus that to the maximum floor area equivalent to 50% of the floor area that is used as childcare. These show the preliminary landscape plans. One item to note here is that a basketball court area is proposed for the rooftop garden. The second floor terrace appears to primarily be for seating, and then the first floor play area is the primary play space for the preschool through kindergarten grade levels. This shows the elevation oriented as viewed from the parking lot with the elevated platform and the buildings. The top view here is from the drop-off corridor on the southern edge of the property, and the bottom is the view from the street. These designs are still preliminary and would be subject to change upon the formal, but we would definitely appreciate the ARB's feedback. This shows a section of the design. This shows the 6-foot elevation from existing grade to the base flood elevation, and that the overall building height is 35 feet, which is the zoning maximum. However, here it is being measured from the 6-foot platform, and upon discussion with the planning director, it's been determined that this platform would be considered a berm, and therefore the maximum height would need to be measured from existing grade and not from the platform. Additionally, the rooftop garden shown is proposed to exceed the maximum height, which again would require a zoning text amendment. Specifically in the definition section of the code, the grade is measured from existing grade and excludes berms, planters, and similar. And so because it is considered a berm, that is why the grade needs to be measured from existing, why the height needs to be measured from existing grade. This concludes my presentation. The applicant, Michelle Huber, is present and has a presentation as well. Thank you.
Before we move on, do we have any questions of staff on their presentation? Yeah, go ahead, Board Member Hirsch. It'll be 1 second, please, while we ask some questions.
On the floodplain issues, are you allowed to build into it as long as it is, whatever you build into it has some kind of a waterproof perimeter to it? Is that a possibility?
Public Works Engineering Department requires the finished floor of the building to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation. And so in order to construct something that meets the FEMA requirements and the local regulations, it does need to be elevated somehow. So the question here isn't about how much it's being raised, it's how the maximum height of the building is being measured, because they will need to elevate out of the floodplain kind of regardless.
To follow up with that question, that applies to habitable space, correct? Not necessarily uninhabitable space.
Well,
Right, I believe for commercial versus residential, you can have like uninhabitable space, like a parking structure or something that could go, but there would be a lot of waterproofing involved.
so never a use space within the
Yeah, you can't
floodplain.
have the habitable space. It has to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation. And I believe the base flood elevation is 10.5 in this area. Yeah, and so 11.5 would be what it needs to be at.
If you could build a waterproof wall, you wouldn't be
I
allowed,
mean,
huh?
there are other structures in this area that have that, but just be aware that, you also end up having either one way or another, you have some sort of solid wall.
Yeah.
That is, so.
Okay, well, that's a limitation.
Your light is on, Board Member Hirsch. Are you done with your question?
No. Would be helpful if you really described in some way, but certainly the applicant could do this as well. The circulation, just how it works within the site, especially, let's say, if there's going to be something like bus delivery issues within the site.
David, could we hold that off for the applicant? This is a staff question.
Sure,
We'll
we
Give the
could
applicant a
ask
chance
them.
to really go through
Yeah,
that.
we could
It's
ask them
very
on
much a
that one.
very good
Yeah.
question.
Let me just see. Okay, well, the other question was why the podium? Now that's been answered, certainly. Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Board Member
Thanks.
Adcock?
Thank you, Chair Balte. I have two questions. The first one is also about grade. I did drive by the site, but you can only see the front a little bit. Is the site pretty flat? Like where you're measuring existing grade, is it, plus minus a foot all the way around, or is it taller in the back?
The formal application will require a survey to be submitted that would have that information, but I do not yet have that information. It's possible the applicant will be able to clarify.
I did walk around the site and it's relatively flat, certainly within a foot
Okay,
everywhere.
so the grade that you're measuring is, of maybe 6, maybe 5, but in that range.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is about the zoning amendment. You mentioned that they need a zoning amendment for the rooftop garden. So is that for the height or for the use of the roof as a roof garden?
It is for, we might have to take a closer look, but I believe it is for both. Currently, rooftop gardens are typically only allowed either in the downtown or in certain housing areas for housing projects. The height exception is definitely limited to those areas, but in general, the overall use is as well. Something else we would be wanting to take a look at in this particular context is there are often limitations to rooftop gardens within 150 feet of residential, and the site is within 150 feet of residential uses.
Thank you.
Board Member Chen?
Could you please explain more about the floor area calculation for the daycare? Because and also the 50% bonus. Does it also include portion of the shared space and say corridor and other classrooms?
The calculations provided are preliminary, and we would be looking at that in more detail in the formal application in terms of the exact breakdown. And so I'm not completely sure how it was calculated in this context, but in general, this is from the zoning code, which allows that bonus area to be granted.
So when you calculate, does the shared space should also be included in the calculation? Or it's only just the preschool classrooms to be calculated?
It should be the areas that are exclusively for the preschool, which may include, some portion of the shared area, but not all of it if it's shared between the other grades.
Okay, thank you. And another question is for this irregular shape of the site, where is the rear and where is the side?
So because the RLLM zoning district has a 20-foot setback for both the interior sides and for the rear, that was kind of my primary focus. In general, the rear setback is the one that is furthest and most parallel to the street. I might not have a good answer at this moment.
On the table, let's see. On the table, which one was assumed to be the rear setback? I would think it's the closest to the creek.
Well,
And,
no, the creek's on this side,
oh, sorry. Okay.
so it's one of these two.
You want to share your screen?
Oh, yeah.
We'll share the screen for a second. Hold on. No. Zoom out or share the full screen. Yeah. Zoom out. Zoom out. Yeah. Perfect.
So based on the street location, we would expect the rear to likely either be, can you see my cursor? Yeah. Either this one or this one. But again, since for the setbacks are the same on all of the sides, is there something in particular that it affected?
Yeah, it's 20 feet no matter what, whether it's interior or
Okay,
rear
gotcha.
or anything.
And there's no
So,
daylight plan requirement
right.
for.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So you just passed a pop quiz, Emily. Any other questions? Could you please then explain to me, in the housing element, this site is listed as for housing, and I see in the report that it's not going to be any longer. Could you give us some background on that, please? We had a comment from one of the members of the public, a letter to us discussing exactly this question.
Yeah, so the adopted housing element right now includes this site. My understanding is that in some of the comments from HCD on our latest housing element, there were some questions about the sites that were selected and asking for, more assurance that certain sites that were selected would become housing and or choosing other sites that were more likely to become housing. And so in response to HCD, there are some changes proposed to the housing element that would change some of the selected sites, including this site being removed from that housing element, but others being added to still meet our RENA. So whether council will adopt those changes or not is, not yet known. But so we have to treat it based on our current adopted housing element. But we would have to review that at the time that the formal application is filed. And if there's been a change to what's been adopted at that point in time, then we would evaluate it from there.
So clarify for me, please, if the site currently is listed as a potential housing site in the housing element, does that give any force to a development proposal that proposes something other than housing?
It doesn't preclude you from proposing something other than housing. Just because you're a housing element site doesn't make you, force you to do exclusively residential uses. But what the city would have to evaluate, staff would have to evaluate at that point in time is, how we would still meet our RENA even without, these units being proposed. Because not all housing element sites necessarily will be developed as housing, but we would have to evaluate. We always do a buffer. So when you look at the housing element, you have the RENA plus buffer. That buffer of 10% typically is what allows flexibility in the housing element sites. And so you basically say, look, like we have these buffers built in so that if one site chooses to do something else with their site, we still have our RENA met through that buffer.
So the housing, being listed on the housing element as a housing site doesn't give it the force of zoning law that you must do that.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
And just a quick follow-up on that. There's no onus on the applicant to say, well, we're not going to do housing here, but here's another property, or like, it's not on them, correct?
Correct. It's not on them. We would evaluate that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Board Member Chen.
So I noticed for the parking requirement, it only require for the teachers. How about, is there any short-term parking for parents to pick up, drop off per zoning code?
So not per the zoning code. The zoning code required parking is as listed on the cover sheet of the plans and is based on the teacher staffing. However, as a part of the CUP application for private schools, we typically will require a circulation study to see how the drop off and pickup would go based on the expected enrollment. And we would make a determination at that time if additional parking was needed.
I'm sure we're going to get into that in a few minutes, but okay. So to the applicant, thank you for your patience. We welcome your presentation. If you could come up, and you will have 10 minutes. If you could please be sure to state and spell your name so our transcriber gets it correct, we greatly appreciate it.
You just need to press that arrow.
Hello, my name is Barbara Graner. I'm the head of School of Silicon Valley International, and my name is spelled B-A-R-B-A-R-A, Graner, G-R-E-I-N-E-R.
Thank you.
Thank you for welcoming us today. Silicon Valley International is a school with 715 students from preschool to 12th grade. We are currently located on 2 campuses, one in Palo Alto, one in Menlo Park. We are an immersion program, so our students are bilingual, and we have 3 language tracks, German, French, and Chinese. We are also an IB school. We are accredited by the International Baccalaureate Organization. And as such, we really strive to educate students that will have a positive impact on the world by being critical thinkers, researchers, communicators, and problem solvers. The mission of our school is really to empower our students through bilingualism and inquiry, and empower them to embrace complexity and see the world from multiple perspectives. We have, as I said, 2 campuses. We were created in 1979 in Palo Alto, and in 1996 we grew quite a lot and we acquired a second campus. And from 1996 to 2021, both of our campuses were located in Palo Alto. 2021, sorry. In 2021, one of our leases came to an end and we temporarily relocated one of our campus in Menlo Park. In 2022, we purchased the East Meadow Circle, a property on East Meadow Circle, with the goal of bringing back 2 campuses in Palo Alto. On East Meadow Circle, we would like to bring our younger students, so our preschooler and younger elementary students from preschool to 2nd grade. We want them to be together because they are similar need. And we really would like our preschool to be located in Palo Alto because 20% of our families are actually from Palo Alto. We currently have 150 students in preschool pre-K, and we think that by the time we move to East Meadow, we will have about 160 students in preschool pre-K. Our school has this goal of welcoming students from all backgrounds, and therefore we dedicate 9% of our budget to financial aid. And last but not least, we've always been good neighbors in Palo Alto since 1979. We intend to continue to do the same. And we started open communication with our neighbors early in the process. We've sent them letters. We've let them know that we were having this public hearing today. And so far, we have received a few positive feedback from our neighbors. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Huber. I'm a principal at Studio Bondi Architecture. My name is spelled MICHELLEHUBER. We are very happy to have the chance to present our project to you, answer your questions, and get your feedback. In particular, we hope to get your feedback on some of the elements that have been discussed by Emily Callis, which is our building height and our outdoor spaces and our play areas, and in particular the rooftop garden. A lot of the images you will have just seen, but to add a little bit more detail and hopefully to answer some of the questions that came up during the staff questioning. Just to start, we have outlined our proposed building footprint on the existing site. In red, you can see superimposed over the existing building. To give you some visual context, these are some of the images of our neighbors, and the existing building is the image at the top. This is our proposed site plan, which has been a little bit developed since the images that we submitted with our application. We're showing the integrated context of the landscape design with our site plan. And the design intent for the site was really to develop a site that would work best to support the school's program and their mission, and at the same time respecting the context of the neighborhood, and in particular the privacy of our neighbors. So our design solution was to rotate this building so that it acts as a buffer, both acoustic and visual, for the large preschool play yard in the center of our campus. And as was described, our preschool program will have 160 students and will be licensed through the state of California, which will then dictate the minimum size of outdoor spaces for this play yard. For 160 students, that's 12,000 square feet, which is what we're showing in this design. And as was said, that this play yard will be designed to be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate for preschoolers and also for kindergartners so that they can use this site when preschoolers are not using it. However, it doesn't work for our older students in grades 1 and 2. Developmentally, it's the design doesn't support where they are developmentally and the gross motor skills that they're learning. You can see that the site is kind of already taken up with all the other elements in the parking lot. So the only place to locate this play yard, which is a key component of the school, is on the rooftop. And so as was said, we're proposing to develop this rooftop as per the guidelines and the standards of the city for rooftop gardens. And we'll go into a little bit more detail of that design shortly. We do have a preliminary traffic circulation study and diagram. And the goal here and the design was really to design a drive aisle as long as possible to get as many cars onto our site during that pickup and drop off period, with two one-way lanes through the site, and our pickup and drop off zone sort of as deep into the property as is possible. I'll answer one other question that came up earlier, which is that our site is relatively flat. There's roughly a 2-foot grade change from East Meadow Circle to the back of our parcel. The floor plans have already been discussed, so I'll just point out kind of briefly the orange rooms in the diagram are our classrooms. Our preschool classrooms are designed to wrap around the preschool play yard and maintain a real direct indoor-outdoor connection to those spaces. Our second floor we've discussed. And then I'll describe the next two slides are diagrams that intend to show our design intent as we're sort of trying to resolve what are two of the kind of the key challenges of the site. It's been discussed. We're in this flood zone, and per FEMA, we have no other option but to design our first floor to be 1 foot above base flood elevation, which raises the grade to roughly 6 feet. Because this is a requirement to be able to build and develop on this site, our proposed interpretation of the Muni Code as it describes grade is that there's an exception when that grade needs to be raised for drainage. It does exclude berms. Berms cannot be counted as that point of grade, but elevated plains required for drainage are allowed to be considered grade. And so our design proposes that approach to be able to let us measure our building height from that new grade and reach the 35-foot maximum. In terms of our rooftop garden design, we are proposing to locate all of the rooftop structures maximum of 12 feet above the allowed 35-foot height limit, which is our reading and our understanding of what the design guidelines are for rooftop gardens. In addition, there's a 45-degree angle that describes, again, where the rooftop structures are allowed to be located, measured from the edge of the building and the top of the roof. So in our proposed design, we have a 10-foot fence around this rooftop garden, which would then be set back 10 feet from our parapet, and thus would be a minimum of 50 feet away from our neighbors to the south, or our property line there. So we're in very early stages of designing this rooftop garden, and we're hoping to take your feedback to incorporate into the design. But this is our early concept for this rooftop garden that would be appropriate for first and second graders. It includes a half-court basketball court, a small play structure, and about a third of this rooftop garden area would actually be rooftop garden with raised planter beds to support the school's garden program.
If I could interrupt you for 1 second,
Sure.
your time is over. However, we would like
Okay.
to hear from you. How much longer do you think it would take to complete your presentation?
Probably 2 minutes. I'll do it.
Please go ahead. We really
Thank
do
you.
want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much. We have some precedent images that are examples of similar rooftop elements, and our design would propose to be similar. The two images on the left are actually projects that my firm did in San Francisco for San Francisco Day School, which was also in a residential neighborhood. This is an elevation from the south side, and in particular, we wanted to study it because this is the view from our residential neighbors. And the upper view is sort of a view from a second-story window, and the actual experience would be from grade, which is the smaller rendering at the bottom. And from grade at the property line, looking up towards our building, you can see the rooftop garden isn't visible, which is important to us to respect privacy. Very quickly to describe the design intent for the building itself is to just be a straightforward building with clean, modern lines, a modern aesthetic, using the joints and the reveals of our eaves system and a recessed entry to provide some interest to the front facade. and then integrating the plinth, the required raised elevation, as elegantly and simply as possible. You've seen this view, and I'll just point out that we have designed that play yard so that the grade steps down, and we're immediately adjacent to the building where the classrooms enter and exit, but then the play yard steps down to kind of mitigate that plinth as we step down to the parking lot. And this is our final image, which is the more developed design for the preschool play yard. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. You can stay there. I imagine we'll have some questions for you. So do we want to hear from the public first if we have any comments, or let's do a round of questions with the applicant and see what. Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to address us on this?
Currently, no. Yes, one raised hand on Zoom.
Okay, why don't we close the meeting or open the meeting to the public? You can sit down for a second and we'll hear from the public then. So if we could go ahead and hear from the member of the public.
Yes, one person with the name Eichler Zoom. If you can unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Kelly Took. I'm the manager at Eichler Swim and Tennis Club. Thank you for the presentation and for the time to speak. We are, we are friendly to our neighbors and we want to work together. And I would just like to say that, this is a humongous building that's going right behind our property. And I'd just like to say that we're very concerned with it on behalf of Eichler members and the Eichler board. I think it would drastically change the feel of our club to have a tremendous building behind our property, not only the construction and demolition of the current building, but the construction of a new building. And I'm sure the neighbors, are right next to our courts 1 and 2, would feel the same. But that's all I'd like to say is just that we're still very concerned with the current plan presented.
Thank you very much. Okay, again, we have no other members of the public who wish to speak.
One more person just raised their hand, Helen Picos.
Okay, if you could, you'll have 3 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Helen Picos. I'm head of special project at Eichler Swim and Tennis Club. And as Kelly Took, our general manager, was saying, we are mostly concerned with the elevation, the total elevation, and the exterior garden rooftop. We will be following up closely with all the future hearings, but the elevation is very concerning for the privacy of our members, the tranquility, etc. So we're looking forward to work with you, but elevation is a big concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
No, that's it.
Very well, thank you. We'll close the meeting to public comment, bring it back to the board for questions of the applicant. Board member Hirsch, you were starting before. Do you like to go ahead?
Yes, maybe you could describe a little bit the circulation, how the buses will, pick up, drop off. Again, the question another board member asked was what your plans are for the private vehicles, pickup, delivery, etc. Whoop, you're not on.
I think I'll defer to the head of school, Barbara, on that question.
Okay.
So to answer your question on the busing, we currently are developing a busing program for our 2 campuses. The one in Menlo Park has a busing program with 2 buses, one coming from the north, one coming from the south, and it picks up daily about 60 students. Our current campus in Palo Alto doesn't have one, but we're looking into developing one for next year, and it would be a similar pattern of a bus coming from the north and coming from the difficulty would be having a busing program for preschoolers, but you can certainly have a busing program from 1st grade to 2nd grade.
Okay, now if you could describe where the buses are going to be on the site. I think it's more to that, not a general program question. It's a question of how the site is handled to accept the delivery of the kids in buses and in private vehicles.
So you mean where would be the drop-off and the pickup on
Yes.
on the site? So we currently, the way our site is designed is we have for parents as their students are arriving for kindergarten to 2nd grade, we have a drop-off zone, and the cars will be dropping off in that zone, and the buses would be also dropping on in that zone. And parents that are preschoolers and pre-K parents will be parking to bring the students in the building.
Where?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
We just brought up a visual. Do you think?
Yeah, or I can just clarify, it's where the E on the site plan is.
Yes, go ahead.
So the E on the site plan is the designated drop-off spot. There's a bit of a curb indent. Perhaps the applicant can speak more towards, if all cars would be using the indent or just the buses, but this is the designated drop-off area.
Yes, and what we do in our current campuses is we have multiple drop-off times. So kindergarten are not drop off at the same time as 1st graders and 2nd graders, and preschoolers are also drop at a different time. So there will be three times for drop-off and pickup. About 15 minutes apart each, and this is where you have that place that is marked E would be where parents will be dropping off, and parents of pre-K and preschool students would be parking.
Well, yeah, I have a little more questions about this, but maybe I can understand it myself. But the normal teacher parking, let's talk about that for a minute. Is there a kind of a circulation where they go into the sort of cul-de-sac of the site there as a normal method of getting to a teacher's spot so that they can pass by all of the potential teacher spots on the way into the parking? Otherwise, you'd have some spots that are left over, which isn't going to work very well. Or do you assign teachers' locations to a spot
So currently, in our Menlo Park campus, where we have our preschoolers and pre-K, we have a parking spot that are designed specifically for parents and parking spot that are designed specifically for teachers.
You'll assign them a particular location. Look, I think that there's a solution here. I just wanted to see what it was.
This is what we have currently, and this is what we are looking into doing also.
That's pretty clear then. In terms of the transportation, I don't have any additional questions on that.
David,
except the street. Will you be using the circle in any way?
For parking.
For parking, for delivery, for whatever. There's a major staircase, ramp, et cetera, from the street itself, right? So is that going to be used so that there'll be any impact on the street at all? I mean, or any delivery on the street? It seems like it's a major entry point.
Yes. So, of course, when you have a school, you have deliveries and you have
okay.
That yes, we would be
Okay,
Yeah.
If I may add one item, just that we haven't discussed yet, the site plan does indicate that it will be a one-way drive aisle.
Yeah.
With the two driveways, the one further to the right being the entrance and the one closer to the parking spaces being the exit.
yes, correct, yeah. No, the circulation, this is from my own personal experience with my grandchildren, trying to pick them up after school time. It's a mess. And I think that the solution is here. I just wanted to describe. Thanks.
Let's see if we have any other questions regarding the circulation, anything like that. So just stay focused on these subjects. Anybody have anything about site circulation, transportation?
Just a minor follow-up question regarding the bus versus the regular, first graders. You mentioned that it was 15-minute drop-off time. So if you have a bus coming with, 20 kids, that takes some time to get all of those kids out, and then all the parents are waiting behind, correct? Is that how you're intending it, or like the bus pulls off?
So the way it's currently working on our Menlo Park campus is that the bus is dropping off at a place where it's not blocking the circulation for the parents, and we intend to do something similar.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the spot E seems like it would be blocking the row
Yes,
of
we
parents
would
behind.
need to designate another start at the spot E. Spot E is for drop off by the parents.
Okay. So
Board Member
Thank you.
Shen, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, so you mentioned about there are about 160 students for the pre-K and preschool. So how many students will be there from K to 2?
How many students will be there from K to 2?
Yeah.
So from K to 2, we have 12 classrooms with about 18 to 20 students each. So it's your classroom from, so how many students?
If we assume 12
Yes,
classrooms
we-
at 20 kids each, it's about 240 students
Yes.
for kindergarten,
Yes.
first and second.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I want to continue just a little bit with this one about the drop off. I'm sorry.
Okay, the drop off.
To be so crazy about this, but I had such experience, such bad experience. So I hope to, whatever we say to you, that you will think about it, because it gets to be so important, actually. And I know you know that, but because the whole scheme is sort of built on this idea of delivery, which is good. It's long queues to get into the property. So, on the, I don't know, I can't see the direction, but on the side where the drop off will be, or drop off pickup, basically, don't you think you would need more sidewalk at that location where it says C on the site plan here? You have a series of trees and plantings, and access to the drop-off location would seem to work better if you had more paving. How do you?
We can certainly look into that. Yes.
Yeah, I just think that knowing that the drop-off is so incredibly important, really, and the pickup, of course. So think about that, the length of it and where the queuing will be with the buses if it's happening at the same time as the pickup for private cars.
Hi, thank you for your presentation today. I have a few questions regarding the circulation as well. Mine are more in context of, I can see how this is working. I can understand Board Member Hirsch's commentary. I've got several experiences recently with preschool and kindergarten drop-off myself and have thoughts, but at this time, I'm going to focus my questions on what these conditions are sort of here and here. So if you can see the blue marks, it appears that this entire wall coming along here.
Sorry, I'm not seeing. Oh,
You see it on the large screen?
Mhm.
Okay, so that long extent of wall, if I'm understanding that correctly, that's all 6 feet tall, approximately. It might even be 7 feet tall over in this back corner here if the slope is coming off. Yeah,
No, you're
please.
correct. The maximum height would be, maximum height would be 6 feet.
Okay, maximum height is 6 feet. So do you know what the height is over sort of at this entry area?
It would be slightly lower. That's
Slightly
where the
lower.
grade
Okay,
is,
perfect.
is lower.
So there's no sidewalk next to this drive aisle. So it really is a drive aisle directly next to a sheer 6-foot tall retaining wall. Is that correct?
There is, that's correct. At the elevated grade, there is a walkway that would be part of our egress, but at the drive aisle, you're correct.
Okay, so understood. So basically this is your walkway and then this is your greenery area.
Right.
Okay. And then on this outer perimeter, is that all at the lower grade adjacent to the drive aisle?
Can you point to,
Sure, this portion out here
that would be all at grade.
at grade. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And just for clarity, do you know how many parking spaces are required for teachers?
Yes, the calculation for our use and the number of classrooms and teaching stations for preschool and the older kids is 58, which is what we're providing.
So you're providing 58 parking spaces for teachers, staff, et cetera, but you're also expecting parents to park and then drop off their children.
The calculation is described as measuring it against teacher stations.
Sure.
But that is the minimum that's required and the maximum we can get on our site while trying to accommodate the rest of the program.
The different time for drop off and pickup will help. You usually make sure that the preschool pre-K, the way it's currently happening in our preschool pre-K in Menlo Park is they have to drop off anytime before 9.
Sure.
And therefore they're not, as a result, they're not arriving at all together, and it makes for circulation easier. And we do have, not all the teachers are starting at the same time as well. So, I mean, it's a scheduling calculation, and it asks for a lot of work in advance.
Yeah.
That allows us to make it work.
Okay. I have 2 questions asking if you've considered these 2 items. One would be, have you considered, as Board Member Hirsch suggested, a longer drop-off aisle where the parents have no need to park, and that maybe there's some teacher-assisted helping of kids getting out of the cars, even for the preschool and the pre-K? Is that something that has been considered by you guys?
Oh, yeah.
So absolutely for kindergarten and for first to 2nd grade.
Sure.
For preschool pre-K, currently code requires that parents, licensing requires that parents signing the children in the classroom.
Understood. Okay.
For obvious safety reason.
Understood. And then a secondary question is, have you guys considered at all a underground parking structure beneath this building? Since you are already raising it up 6 feet tall, you only kind of have to dig down a few more feet. So I'm wondering if that was something that was considered, discussed, or reviewed. I can see the looks between you two.
It's prohibitively expensive. And, to get down to even though it's not a significant additional grade to excavate, but, you have to sort of design it so that your car, can clear those height minimums, and it starts to eat away at the perimeter of what is our play yard and starts to compromise, what we need to support the program. And again, it's prohibitively expensive, and it would all be designed in the flood zone, so it would have to be engineered. There's a more robust engineering design requirement there to meet the hydrostatic pressure of the flood zone.
Thank you. That's all my questions for now.
I'd like to ask a question that'll bring us into the building design. After I've dropped my child off at Station E on your site plan, how does the child, my 2nd grader, get into the building itself? Could you walk me through the morning path the student takes?
So we would have, they will be going directly to the classrooms, and we will have teachers and teacher assistant along the way to help them get them.
Could you bring up maybe the first or second floor plan so I can see, first floor plan perhaps? Right there, yeah. So I've dropped my student off at Station E, the crosshatched parking area on the left. And how do they enter the building? Which door do they go into?
Depends on the grade level, but you see that you have multiple entrance. You have one next to the multipurpose room and you want one that is closer to the classrooms. And this is for the kindergartens, the students, the one that they will be taking, as well as first graders.
So they would enter at the far end of the classroom hallway?
Yes, and go upstairs, yes.
So you intend for the students to, every morning, to come in down the hallway of the classrooms?
For the pre-kindergarten, yes, because the classroom are there.
Okay,
And
good.
they will be going directly to the classroom.
And if it's a rainy day or inclement weather, they would still also be able to make their way across the play yard to the main entrance to the school? It looks to me like where it says reception is the entrance, the front door of the school here.
The reception area off of East Meadow Circle also has a secondary entry that goes around across or alongside the multipurpose room. But for students, they could use that entrance, but there also is, as Barbara pointed out, Page South, I'll call it Southwest. There is an entry there that takes students directly to the hallway that leads to the classrooms.
Okay, well, thank you for making that clear. Why did you choose to orient the courtyard of the building to the north?
It's a puzzling parcel with 7 property lines and oddly shaped spaces. But the fact that we could design a very efficient U-shaped building set up what seemed to be a good approach to protect that preschool play yard on those the building on 3 sides and facing north. It was the best orientation for the size of the play yard. And then again, to allow the building to be a buffer from our southern neighbors.
But it seems you're buffering from industrial neighbors, not from residential neighbors. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Actually, the southern wing of the building is our property line that is adjacent to the residential zone.
I see, okay.
Page South.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Do you want to go into comments? The roof deck, you had some questions about that, Board Member Adcock?
I do,
Go
actually.
right ahead.
Going back to, I had the same thought about below grade parking. I'm just like you guys, right? And it's kind of a potential obvious solution. Were you considering the garage under the playground, the preschool playground as well, right? And using the entire plinth as the garage. And I know it's expensive, but it has potential to solve, neighbor concerns as well and not have your rooftop garden be an issue, right? If you make get all of your 58 parking below the building, which seems plausible, then the teacher parking or whatever that is on the bottom left in plan could be used for upper grade play area. And therefore your construction of your roof with, basketball court and vegetable garden, that's not cheap construction either. So if you were to consider that as part of the trade-off and not need 10-foot fencing on the roof and stay within your 35 feet limit, you already have the problem of 35 plus 6, right? 35 plus 6 plus 10 seems to be a pretty significant ask given the single story neighbors behind other than the swim club, swim and tennis clubs. I would urge you to consider that some more. The parking doesn't need to be very tall. You're already 6 feet above. You need a few more feet below. I would really urge you to look into that more.
It sounds like we should do that study. We take your comments to heart.
Let's
Small
keep it-
point of clarification, the 6 plus 35 plus 10, slightly less than that because our fence line would be measured from the top of the roof and there's a
That's true.
5-foot
So
parapet.
another
So
minus 3 or 4 feet.
minus a few feet, yes.
Yeah.
I have one question about the security. So it's a gated campus. Is there any other control point around the building?
Our proposed design has a fence, a perimeter fence all the way around with gates, both vehicular and pedestrian gates. But the main security checkpoint is the reception area, which will have views to the two entries. And there will be a whole security design for the building, for the education use.
How about the long stairs along on the sidewall?
The long stairs on the sidewalk would be within the property line, if I'm understanding.
Yeah, so
Oh,
there's,
the entry stairs.
yeah, right, the entry.
The entry stairs would be outside of a perimeter fence. That would be the public access to the entry doors to the main entry. And so
Okay.
there would be a security checkpoint at the
Okay,
entry doors.
okay, thank you. And on the sections, you show floor to floor height is 15 feet for each floor. So I know it's still preliminary design for now, but do you have any thoughts about the floor assembly? And what's the ceiling height for the classrooms?
Yes, both. We have some preliminary design for that. The floor assembly, it's a steel frame structure with wide flange beams and a concrete filled metal pan deck for the flooring. Our floor to floor is proposed to be 15 feet. And generally, when we design schools, that's our standard. That's our sort of basis point, with an understanding that with the structure and mechanical systems, plumbing, sprinklers, electrical, that, and then the drop ceiling in that soffit area is usually 3 to 4 feet. And so that would give our ceiling heights to be 11 to 12 feet, which is for us, that's sort of our best practice to provide, the most desirable classroom environment.
Quick question regarding the multipurpose room. Is that a double height structure?
It will be double height.
Thank you.
Or height and a half. It might be a little bit lower.
Have you done classrooms with lower ceiling heights? And if so, what heights have you reduced it to in the past?
We have done classrooms when we're starting from scratch. We usually stick to what I just described. We might go 1 foot lower, but typically not. When we're renovating existing buildings, of course, you work with what you've got, but it makes a significant difference in terms of the experience in that space. The lower the ceiling, the less open it feels.
What are the dimensions of the classrooms approximately? I'm just trying to get a sense for what the three-dimensional volume of the space is.
Roughly, they're in the preschool classrooms are a little bit larger than the first and second grade classrooms, for example, but in general, they're in the range of 750 to 850 square feet.
I mean, any given
Yes,
length.
and the width is usually about 26, 27 feet, and the length is roughly 35. And I
Okay.
hope that math works out, but that's the general.
And you're saying you'd
footprint.
like to have 11 feet of ceiling height in that
Yes.
space. And that's sort of the ideal for the educational purpose.
Yes.
In your experience.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, to follow up a little bit on that is because there's nothing indicated that the schematics phase here about mechanicals. And of course, some of the mechanicals are likely to be on the rooftop. It's a part of the further development, but there would be assumed a hung ceiling in the classrooms, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Just to stick with this question that was raised about the perimeter circulation once again, which is such a critical issue, and the play area, which is really kind of in conflict, the two of them kind of with each other. Based on this comment that was made, if you had to take a piece of the site and reduce or eliminate the rooftop play area in itself, then that would sort of necessitate at least some of the parking to go under the building. So if a partial, just for consideration purposes, if a partial element of the building allowed for parking under, you could reduce and then shift the play area to some portion of the parking lot, such as maybe the cul-de-sac itself, since the delivery system seems to be working. Is that a possibility?
It's hard to say that, yes, it's a possibility, knowing the cost
Cost.
that is connected to it.
But if it isn't the entire building, that there's a section of the area that's called A down there that is quite, I'm assuming, wide enough to be a certainly double parked area, you know?
It's definitely, it would need to be studied, but my experience with laying out parking lots, whether they be at grade structures or underground, is that there's a lot of real estate that's required for that circulation. And then, you know, to be efficient, you've got a double loaded drive aisle and then structural columns. There's a lot of real estate that's required for, at the end of the day, you know, potentially not the number of parking spaces that you would hope for the cost trade-off. I haven't priced an underground parking lot in a while, but back in the day, the rule of thumb was it was $20,000 per space. And I don't know how accurate that is today, but it's a lot of money for a school that has got an incredibly tight budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could see that as a conflict issue, but I also see just sort of the side that the rooftop playground is on also reflects back onto the residential areas behind it, and kids are full of noise when they play, which is quite nice. But I could see there'd be a kind of a conflict there between a playground on the roof and the residential area that's behind it to be considered. So it could be mitigated by some method of soundproofing, you know, of the wall facing towards the residents. But it's a real consideration, I would think, that you shouldn't forget.
Absolutely. I think we're kind of happily surprised by the visual privacy that the design has landed at, where our neighbors won't be able to visually see students or fences or anything from their property. But understood. The nice thing about schools is that they only operate during the day. They aren't there on the weekends or in the evenings or on the holiday. And the play area wouldn't be used nonstop all day long. It would be during recess and lunchtime. And there is ambient recreational noise as part of the neighborhood already.
It's true.
Obviously, we would be adding to that.
But it's tennis. It isn't the wildly.
It's tennis and swimming and lap strokes.
Okay.
Yes, it is a consideration.
Yeah. I think you could do something that is, if you had to do a trade-off between the parking under the building and a soundproofing wall on the rooftop, that should be a consideration here.
We'll get into some comments here, maybe.
It is my understanding that the previous business that was there was very noisy all day long.
Okay, point has been made, fair enough. Yeah, the Eichler Club is a fairly sedate space. My understanding is that that's some sort of a historic designation on that property. Is that true?
It is not formally designated, but we recognize that it is an original Eichler structure. And if it were to be evaluated, think it is likely it would be eligible, but it is not formally designated.
Will we be doing an environmental impact report on this project?
Yes.
And one element in the EIR is impact on other structures, potentially historic structures. Is that right?
Typically, review of historic structures is limited to structures on the site itself. There would be consideration to how neighbors would be potentially impacted, but it would not be typical to evaluate the historic status of adjacent structures as a part of a development proposal.
I just want to clarify, I don't know if we've made any sort of determination on the level of CEQA analysis that we would be doing. There would be an environmental analysis, but I don't know if, okay, I just want to be clear on that.
And do we have any contextual compatibility requirement in this site, in this zoning district? I'm not sure if that actually applies here. I'm basically driving towards the visual impact of this building next to what's really a low slung, single-story property.
Yes, the context-based design criteria would be applicable.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more very quick question for the applicant, if you don't mind. Getting up to that rooftop terrace, is the primary means of access, egress, ingress, is that staircase?
We have two means of egress for that site. One of them is an interior stair. And for the most part, the first and second graders would be going up and down one flight of stairs to the rooftop from their classrooms.
Okay, and so it's that enclosed stair sort of on the right-hand side of your roof plan?
Correct.
Okay, and there is the ADA accessibility via the elevator to get up there?
That's right.
Great, thank you.
I have one kind of related egress question as well. So from from all floors, you're egressing out towards the parking on one side, right, with your stair on the left. And looks like the one on the right in plan, the stair that's behind the little corner hub comes out to that raised platform and then has a stair. I'm trying to make connection between your site plan and the floor plan. Then it has a little stair that basically dumps you out into the drive aisle. Does
the stair on the right dumps out onto a plinth height walkway that would take you along the, I'll call it east side of the building to the front, and where they would go downstairs or use the ramp to get to East Meadow.
Okay, so your egress path, egress route is along the edge of the building all the way to the front.
On that one side, yes.
Which would require like rated windows on all of your entire
We have
side.
yet to meet with the city building department to confirm that, but my reading is that might not be required, but we would definitely comply with what rating that would need to be.
Yeah, so, yeah, something to consider if you're able to come down to the drive aisle and go to the street versus
Yes.
if you're within 10 feet, if your path of egress travel is along the edge of the building all the way around, pretty much all your classrooms. Now, you should definitely check me on this, but I'm pretty sure all of your rooms, the offices would all end up with 1 hour rated window at a minimum.
We
to get
will
outside.
definitely check ourselves on
Yeah.
that.
And I think it goes back to like having a walkway
Yes,
along the drive aisle would solve your multiple problems.
right. I think it would extend the stair,
Mhm.
but I think that's worth looking at, definitely.
And one other concern I have with your elevation and kind of like, I think Kendra was bringing this up earlier too. Your elevations, you have your, window per classroom with your 6 feet plinth feels pretty ominous as you come in to the drive aisle. So where kids get dropped off, I mean, ideally it's all the way to E, but I drop off my kids every day and you see especially when it's about bell time, parents are dropping off at the street, right? And making the kids run in.
Yeah.
And so I would really urge you to kind of think about, visibility, safety of that edge as, people are not going to wait to get to that circle E if they're running late.
Understood. We design a lot of schools, and this is always the issue. And I think where you can develop good design, as you're describing, and also you need sort of the teacher element to direct and prohibit and prevent the parents from dropping off their kids sooner than the drop-off spot. I think it's a combination.
Yeah. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, Board Member Adcock, that was not a question, it was a comment. So why
Sorry.
don't you continue with other comments on this
I
project?
do not have any more comments. Thank you.
No comments.
I'm sorry?
Let's go into comments. We've been dancing around all. You want to, okay, you can ask a question, go ahead.
You know, just because it was mentioned just now, and if I don't follow up on that, I'll forget it later. So it seems to me that it's very important that you create a good access to the play area on the roof. And the areas that I see as the staircase, which is the likely way to get there, the major staircase at that hub, is an enclosed stair, fire stair, basically.
That's correct.
Wouldn't it be much better if it were an open stair and that hub was more interesting and it wasn't the egress stair? In other words, I really think it's very important that somehow is considered as an open stair. That means that we design in some way to find the location for the fire stair. But it really is a very important connector in the whole building here.
We would love to design that as an open stair. I think we're limited to the communication between only 2 floors. And so the minute we extend that stair to the roof,
It's not a fire stair.
it needs to be very enclosed, yeah.
Yes, so I think you should really reconsider, suggestion here that as a result of comments made, that it just makes me think of that as a very important interconnection and ought to be an open stair. But that's a comment then, yes. Sorry about that. Not a question.
This is a study session, so I think our questions have been pointing very clearly to some concerns we have. Board Member Chen, you have another question. Is that right?
Yeah, I promise
that's
this is the
also-
last one from me. So I forgot to ask about where do all the students eat lunch? Do they eat in the classroom or outside?
I think Barbara can probably speak to that a little bit more clearly.
They eat in the outside in the playground, unless it's raining, and then they eat in the classrooms. The first graders and second graders are eating on the rooftop, and preschool, pre-KK in the main play area.
Okay, colleagues, I think we need to tell them what we think of this. Shall I start? I have a long list of comments here, so. This is a study session. We're really trying to, in an informal way, give you some feedback. And I see a couple of significant problems with your big picture concept. I don't think you meet the height limit. You're going to have to measure the height from the existing grade, not the berm. If we could pull up the street elevation, please, on the screen, I'll show you why I think that is the correct judgment.
Yeah, give us 1 second.
And I think that will make the rooftop playground not possible. It's just, it's going to be too difficult to get all these height pieces to fit together because you do have to get out of the flood zone. And you do legitimately want taller classroom ceilings. So even if you compress your floor assembly from 4 feet to 2 feet, which is a real challenge, I don't think the math will work. But what I just heard the planning department announce is that the director has decided that that exemption you're quoting will not work for you. And I support that strongly. I think that would open up a Pandora's box to the whole town. Every building in the flood zone would then be building up dirt to make it work. And that has tremendous impact on the community, on the neighborhoods. And it's a decision that really city council would need to make. If we want to facilitate construction in flood zones by raising the grade, fine, that's something we should collectively decide, not on a one-off nature building by building, but rather as a real code thing. And if they bring up this photo, this image, that will help understand this. The real point is this, that you're saying you're measuring the height from your plinth. And when I look at your street elevation, your plinth is the farthest thing from landscaping. It's a constructed element of the building. And since when do we measure the height from the 6 feet up constructed front porch of a house or a building of any kind? And so, yeah, the center image on the bottom there, that plinth wrapping around the building is what you're saying is the existing grade. And I think any ordinary person looking at that would say, no, the existing grade is where the road is. And that's the interpretation you're going to have to meet. So unfortunately, it will just change everything on your party. My second thought is that you're basically putting a playground on the roof to allow a parking lot where the playground should be. And I think that's just a fundamental basic thing that kids should be playing on the ground. Put the parking under the building. Once you do that, once you buy into that cost, which is what the real reason you can't do it, everything else will fall into place so easily. And you'll have all other kinds of cost savings. The cost of putting a playground on the roof, the cost of what Board Member Adcock was talking about, 1 hour rated glass all around the building, that's expensive too. Everything else will come into place once you just put the parking underground. It's a 3-foot elevation on the ramp. That's easy. That'll fit without a problem. Many architects deal with the structural post issues. You've got a lot of space. You could fit more than 58 parking spaces underneath. All of a sudden, you'll have all this space around the site to do things with. You can slope the ground. You can do wonderful landscaping because you have all this room. It's just a fundamental party decision on your project that's so hamstrung you as an architect. But I think it's just, you have to do that. The third thing I think is that you've just oriented the building the wrong way, probably because of these other constraints. But I would think you want that second-story courtyard. You want the open area to face the sun. You want the kids to get some light. And right now it's the opposite. You're going to have the strong sun on the side of the building where the classrooms are. So you're going to have shades and all kinds of sun control. And yet, in a day like today where the kids want to play, they're going to be in shadow. And they're going to be cold. They're not going to want to be outside. Is that really educational? I don't think so. So 3 things I think at a high level really encourage you to look back at. I'll leave it to my colleagues to talk about the drive aisle circulation paths and stuff. I think your basic idea is good, that you get the vehicles on site to drop them off. It's wonderful that you have some sort of busing system. And I'm really encouraged to hear how deeply you've thought about and your experience has led you to understand how it works. We've had other schools where it's been more of a problem, and it's really heartening to hear that you understand and want to work with the community and with your families to get this important feature functioning. And I'm pretty confident you will get there. I've written down a note alluding to what Board Member Hirsch talked about, that you really need better internal vertical circulation if you're going to link these spaces that are so important. If the students are having lunch on the rooftop, but they have to get up there through a fire stair, it just doesn't work. You can't do that with second graders. Just go up the stairs and see what they do. They'll get lost. They'll go downstairs instead. You want a broad stair up to the roof where you can see them from the bottom to the top, where they look forward to running out to lunch. These are little kids. You don't send them through a fire stair. You don't send them. Okay, on the student drop-off again, I don't think you've really thought through how the kids get from the drop-off spot into the building. At least when I drop my kids off, or my wife off with her kids, the principal's standing at the front door next to the main entrance to the school. The kids get off, she says hi, they go right into the door. And that's the drop-off process. They're not sneaking into the back through a hallway down a bunch of classrooms, making noise. And again, I think you're so constrained because of your parking decision that you don't have good solutions. Once you change that, I'm confident you do a great job. So really think hard about that. I'm going to touch on the massing of the building because I think you really haven't designed it that much yet, but it's way too boxy. It needs a lot more articulation and detailing, ins and outs, some sort of variation with materials to give it a more pleasant sense. It's really just too tall right now too. You're going to have to try to push on your 15 feet. That's going to happen as you try to meet the height limits anyway. I'm also not so enthusiastic about your broad use of EIFS as an exterior finish material. What I've heard you say is you have an EIFS finish and you're going to put some grid lines in it, and that's going to constitute a decorative building. And we have a standard in Palo Alto, at least we have to find it's of a high quality materials and a high quality design. That doesn't cut it for me. You got to do more than that. I want to see richer materials. Put some masonry or some brick or some real plaster or some tile or some color. If you look at the record on the Castilleja school, which we went through a few years ago, that would qualify for what I call high quality materials. It was a painful process, but in the end, that's what happens. So you can listen to us now, or you can go through that painful process. We want you to just make it work. Yeah, those are my comments on your building and your project. So I'll leave it at that for now. Anybody else? David?
Yeah, thank you again for your presentation. I have given comments already, as Chair Balte said earlier. And, we hate to say, start over, reorient your building. But since you're pretty early on in your design and it's a bit of tail wagging the dog, your parking is setting up your orientation of the building and has the ripple effect of, really expensive roof, like elevator to the roof, stairs to the roof. That's not cheap, 2 stairs to the roof. And so like Chair Balte was saying, kind of stepping back and considering, okay, if that parking is not the constraint, how would you orient the building? Looking at the street, all the buildings have about 20 feet on either side, right, between the fence. And you're leaving quite a bit with the parking and all on the west side, I think, in plan. So if you had a bigger frontage on the street, which the rest of the buildings on that street are happy to have larger frontage versus in the back where you have a couple of single family residences and the swim and racket club, all of being able to step back, having playgrounds, I'm sure like the reaction of the neighbors for kids playing basketball on the roof versus kids playing basketball on the, next to their backyard, 20 feet away, is going to be quite different, so it's dealing with that, having the good relationship with the neighbors would really go a long way if all of that activity was down on the ground with, protected fences for the children and also for noise. The noise mitigation, I'm sure, is something that you would consider if it does stay on the roof, but it's so much easier down on the grade level versus on the roof. So those are my overarching comments. Thank you so much for your presentation.
I would jump in on this. I'm conflicted by it. I really looked at the plan and I really liked the plan so much. And so many buildings are kind of the result of their plan, which is what you study kind of first. In this case, actually, circulation, I think, was what you kind of studied first, and that set up the relationship of the volumes, et cetera, and the issues of light in the courtyard, et cetera, which just were a result of those other two, the plan and the circulation. So it probably wasn't considered enough. But on the other hand, sun moves around, and so that courtyard is going to get different sunlight at different times of the day. And, I wouldn't say the idea of that kind of wonderfully enclosed kind of play area that's surrounded by your building. I thought of that as a really nice protected kind of area for really young kids versus the idea of having to cross a parking lot or passageway. So I differ with my board members here regarding that. But I think that you would have to then study the massing of the building a bit more to consider how the sun really moves and what sort of the sunlight is. And we would have to see if it was going to be represented in this scheme, you would have to really tell us that that was a useful courtyard during times of the year when certainly the sun is very low. In the end, I'm not really so happy with the circulation because of the fact that you are dropping off kids pretty damn far from a front door. You really have 2 front doors, the major front doors, and getting in the back and going down a corridor isn't the best way to get in. That those 2 front doors ought to be the way in which the circulation works to get into the building. I think that was the point that you were making. So that should really be clear to us on the circulation. I really think that the thought of, we've all kind of felt that the idea of putting some of the circulation on the building at least is not an unreasonable idea. It's a costly one. But on the other hand, there are trade-offs, as was suggested, that, and I really think that that kind of cul-de-sac area, which is already a sort of a problem in circulation because cars have to go in and out of it in order to get to all of the private parking spots for teachers. And so if the circulation was maintained as kind of the in-out idea, you've solved the issue of queuing, at a school that my grandchildren have gone to, a preschool. There was an access from a public road. It's a mess. It really is terrible. So it certainly is better to have it solved from the beginning. And I think that there really is a solution here for that, but it probably means some changes so that you get kids in closer to the front door. I've got a bunch of other little thoughts about it. Fence detailing, in the end, we're going to be asking questions about fence detailing, and you have the bicycle parking right in the front, which is going to require some kind of fencing, and it's an ugly situation, and you really ought to think about that seriously. And I recommend that you look at a school by an architect named Datner in New York, who did a wonderful fence around a school that had so much art in it. It was a piece of the design, very much a piece of the design. And you have a lot of areas where there is the need for fencing, perimeter fencing, but the areas where you have like parking, bicycle parking or whatever, really ought to be a design issue that you really think about very seriously, because it's right here in the front of the school. Like the comments about elevations that Chair Bolte discussed were, there must be some better ways than just using EFS for this kind of a construction. Fiber cement panels in all kinds of colors, and relative to the almost international kind of look of the building, I think it's just not very playful for a kid's school. You really could do a lot more with the possible textures, and as Chair Bolte mentioned, somehow it's so flat, the whole thing is a flat facade. I think you really need the building itself. You're going to look back at it a lot, and it isn't very exciting as a building, and it certainly doesn't turn me on as a school building. It should be exciting for kids. Let me see if I have parking circulation. The play yard. Yeah, I just re-emphasize if we don't have the rooftop play area, then I guess the fire stairs are fine, and the corner turnaround can be made into something, that you have a little wider space. So I think that everything else, but I had one other thought. Now I'm trying to remember what that was. Yeah, I think that pretty much is it. I don't want to forget. Oh, well, I really wanted to say that I'm really bothered by the podium cutting off 2,000 square feet or more, I think, of potential space for this building. It bothers me that the city's regulation requires this, because if you can waterproof the bottom of the building as it is, in some way you could waterproof the parking garage. If you had to do a parking garage, you're going to lose it by.
What do you mean by 2,000 square feet of space?
Well, the FAR is bigger, significantly bigger than what they're using.
You're saying if they could use the space
They
below
could
the
use the space
floodplain.
in the podium area.
Yeah, so you should be careful. That's not a city requirement. That's a
Yeah,
FEMA
it's
flood zone.
something
It's a
that
federal
it's
government requirement.
unfortunate. I think it's really unfortunate that the city has that kind of a requirement, since you have the requirement that you're 6 feet up, which is already a huge
Staff, why don't
amount
we
of,
put in a record of clear, whose requirement is the
I was
flood?
going to say, it's a FEMA requirement. It's federal requirement. That doesn't come from the city, but, meeting the flood zone requirements is a FEMA requirement.
I actually believe that technically speaking, being out of the flood zone is the FEMA requirement. The additional 1 foot above that might be a local requirement, but that's only 1 foot of the 6 feet.
if there was a flood and you had a waterproof wall, it would keep the water away somehow. Architecturally, structurally, I know you can do it. And it's a great loss of space down there, which could be a playroom when there's inclement weather outside. Day like the rainy season here, you'd have an indoor play area of some sort, maybe in that area below. Anyhow, that's beside. Once again, I'm challenging things that are unchallengeable.
Why don't you go to Washington, David? I'm sure they'd be happy to pick this one up.
And just so you know,
Okay.
you can be seated. You don't have to stand
Oh,
at the
okay.
podium
Thank
just
you
in
very much.
case.
I love to challenge things that are unchallengeable.
Any other comments on this project?
Yeah.
Board Member Chen, please.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your presentation. So yeah, I do have the same major concern about the drop off, the circulation. And I strongly recommend you to consider about adding some short-term parking for the parents. I have a 3-year-old and 8-year-old. And it took about 2 minutes for my 8-year-old to get off the car and walk by herself. And it always takes more than 5 minutes for my 3-year-old. I will help him get off the car. And especially in this case, parents still need to walk the younger ones to the classroom. It will take longer. So I think the short-term parking for the parents would be important. And I agree with Chair Bolte that south-facing outdoors playground is important. It's critical to the kids and it's benefit to a number of things. So I would suggest you to reconsider about the building orientation. Maybe, I don't want to design for you, but it's just a suggestion. Maybe have the connecting part facing the street and have the 2 wings on each side for the classrooms or an MPR. Then you can have the outdoor playground facing south, which is facing the residential area. And depending on whether you are still doing the above ground parking or the underground parking, you can still, if you do the above ground parking, you can still have the driveway on the 2 sides to connecting to the parking lot at the back. Another reason for this is because I think the current reception area it seems like it's underused. The location, I understand, is facing the street, but it seems like the majority of the students will not go through the reception and then go to the classrooms. And for the ceiling height, I know you're an experienced architect doing educational building designs. So I know we also have some building heights problems here. I want you to maybe rethink about the ceiling height for this particular campus because it's for younger ones. It's for preschool to 2. So the ceiling height could be different from what's required or what is common for the high school students. So maybe it could drop down to 10 or that is just my suggestion. In materials and colors, I agree with what other board members mentioned. Materials need to be high quality, and I would love you to think about maybe some color variations and material elevations. And overall, the exterior elevation, the entire building should be children's scale. Thank you.
Thank you guys for your presentation. I will be echoing a lot of my board members' comments, but I do want to take a moment to say that we do sincerely appreciate you guys coming in early for this pre-review. This is a hard thing to be building. It's hard to build in Palo Alto, and we understand exactly how much work goes into a presentation like this. We also know that a lot of things haven't necessarily been finalized. I'm going to start with some of the things that I think you've done really well. I think that the perimeter drive aisle is a really good idea. I've gone through several schools with my children as well, and we had one school in particular that had a very long dual lane drive aisle where they had a very long area to drop off. So what would happen is about 8 cars would queue up, they'd all unload at once, and then they'd all move forward. It was extremely efficient. And even with staggered drive times, things like that, we had drop off times, excuse me, I would strongly encourage a little bit more thought into just extending that drop off area and just being able to unload at once and come back. I also understand the site constraints with this property. You've got this funny little appendix right out to the side, and maybe that area is really prohibiting. So you almost want to designate that's your surface parking, and then focus on the Pentagon area in the middle and figure out the best orientation for this building. And again, I know that every single one of us up here feels the pain of saying, all right, we got to sort of take a big step back and really re-sketch the party. But I think that's really what's necessary here. Is that the surface parking is just taking up too much of your very valuable space, and having that rooftop garden, while it's a good idea, I don't think it's successful here. And I think that expanding your surface area for play, for eating, for things like that is really going to make this school something special. Whether the specific orientation faces, north, south, things like that. But again, I also want to point out that you do have some neighbors to the south side of what I'm looking at here, are sort of the southwest, that are residential, very low-slung buildings. Having a bunch of very tall structures next to it can be imposing. Same thing for the Eichler Tennis Club. So maybe that's the orientation of the play area. What I would also like to say that I think you've done really well is you've respected your setbacks and your neighbors in that regard. You have not built this structure to the 20-foot limit that you could. And I think that does need to be noted, that you are keeping it in board, partially due to this drive aisle, which is, again, I think a good idea. But I do want to note that this could be a much more imposing building to the neighbors, and it's not. You guys have been thoughtful to some extent in that regard by keeping it in board to the property. I really do need you guys to consider a partial or full basement parking for staff specifically. I think that trying to overlap quick drop-offs of parents and staff parking is going to be problematic in the long run. I understand you guys have extensive history with doing drop-off times, things like that, but it really does need to be explored. Backfilling 6 feet of dirt is not cheap. So what you really want to focus on is the delta of the cost for what you've got planned here versus even doing a partial basement. A few other things, the 6-foot tall wall around the perimeter. One thing that we haven't really brought up is I do think that that's a little bit problematic. It's going to feel like you've got this channel that you're driving through. Additionally to that, I believe you need to have a 42-inch high fence on top of that to prevent someone who's up there from falling off. So not only is it going to be a 6-foot tall wall, you're going to have 42 inches above that of fencing. So that's going to feel really imposing. And I think that there's a way to soften those perimeter edges that should be explored. The building circulation, I do think that there needs to be a bit more connection for the student drop-off. Again, I'm echoing what my fellow board members have stated, that when the drop-off happens, there should be sort of a point where the kids go. Now, that being said, all the Palo Alto schools that we have are, this L-shaped where you sort of drop your kid off at your point and they just go find their classroom, right? But this is smaller kids. And so I think that there should be some point of reference and some sort of very clear entry to get into the building, and then they can go find their classroom. So just whether it's a mini reception area, something, but sort of a more pronounced point of reception for the kiddos. To wrap this up, the exterior materials obviously need a little bit more work. We understand why they are where they are today. It's just you don't want to get too deep into it if you don't know it's going to work. But I would encourage you for the next presentation to really think about some of that, adding some color, adding some life. We do have some standards. We've got base, middle, top. We really want you to keep that in mind. High quality of materials. And it's a school. Have a little fun with it, right? Final items would be trash, circulation. Keep that in mind. Loading, deliveries, unloading, that sort of circulation. We do always pay attention to that. Bicycle circulation. This is a school. I don't know what the rules and regulations are for first and second graders biking to school by themselves. Maybe not allowed, but maybe the staff. So let's just keep that in mind, that the bike circulation would be worth considering. And then again, your just mechanical location. I noticed you'd put a lot of it on the rooftop. it's great. We just want to know, is that where all of it's going? Is that where some of it's going? Just having a little bit more of that information would be extremely helpful. So again, I want to thank you guys for your time. Appreciate you guys being here, and good luck with your project.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to offer you a chance to ask us questions, or if it's not clear what we've been saying in any way. Again, we want to be helpful. We believe it or not, we really want to help you succeed with this project as expeditiously as possible.
Hi, good morning. This is Mindy Romanowski. I'm assisting Silicon Valley International School with land use. It's nice to see all of you, and thank you for your time and your constructive feedback. This is a preliminary ARB hearing, and it's a study session, and thus we really appreciate the comments. Of course, it's never easy to hear some of these things, but I'm curious, is this one of those things where if we did do some redesigning, you would want to see us back for a follow-up preliminary ARB, and this might even be a question for staff, or we would just sort of move forward? What's been your experience with that? Because certainly, you know, it's a lot to invest in a redesign if there's going to be further significant changes. So curious to know your thoughts on that.
Claire, do you want to address that first?
So typically we only do one prelim, but there's nothing that precludes you from, if you would like to do another preliminary review and would like to get that early feedback. We're certainly open to that, but typically we take these comments, and it's usually working with staff to try and find a reasonable medium that tries to think about these concerns and the redesign, or at least understanding, you know, why certain things couldn't be done if they can't be done. So it's really up to you guys to kind of work with staff to decide what is best for you.
If I can add, Attorney Mindy, we've been dancing around having an ad hoc committee assigned to projects as their preliminary. The goal being to try to facilitate feedback with the ARB. We're dancing around the Brown Act on this, but in this case, I intend to appoint two of us to an ad hoc committee. And what I would suggest is that you actually reach out to them. And while they cannot speak for the board, we're pretty much on the same page on this project. And I think you'd find their preliminary feedback invaluable. I will encourage our ad hoc committee to work that way in an effort to avoid having to come back for another preliminary hearing. We want to see you put together a package. We want to approve it. We'd love to see your school in the town. This is a good thing you're doing. And so I suggest that using an ad hoc committee as a means of getting feedback will be helpful. And I'd like to see you then just go to a formal application from that.
For clarification, would that ad hoc committee be sort of facilitated via the staff, and that would be via email? Would there be a Zoom meeting? What would you foresee that ad hoc review?
Entirely up to an ad hoc committee to do as they please. What's important is an ad hoc committee does not speak for the board, and they're not evaluating designs. They're just nominally providing feedback back to the board as to the status of the design.
Yeah, I think we have, my recollection, this is actually before my time, is that we may have done this in the past. Is that accurate? Chair Balte, do you recall that? So I think one of my other colleagues had mentioned that we've done this in the past and it was helpful. There was some questions about, because it's only two members, I don't think it's a Brown Act issue, but consideration of whether we want to, how we want to let the public know about any of those ad hocs, or any, maybe it's just reporting out what was said at that ad hoc meeting or anything. So if this is something that the chair thinks it would be useful, or the applicants think would be useful, I think there is an option for doing this. I'd need to kind of talk internally with management about how we kind of run that. But I think it's fine if we'd like to assign that, and then we can work out the details to make sure we're in conformance.
We will assign an ad hoc committee who's tasked with reviewing the design as it progresses. and reporting back to the board as a whole, reporting out, we call it, what the progress is. The extent to which they provide feedback is in their individual capacity.
And on that note, would it be prudent to allow the applicant to make the choice if they want to do the ad hoc or if they would like to do the full pre-review again?
The applicant always has the choice. I'm not offering them a choice not to have an ad hoc committee. I
Fair.
want that committee because I want us to be
Yes.
aware of how these projects proceed. I feel that for too many years, people get trapped into a cycle with the planning department. A planner sends you a letter, you respond to it, another letter, and each one of these is an expensive revision. We're practicing architects. We understand what you're facing. We want to help, believe it or not, we really do. My hope, fervent expectation is that two of us at least can facilitate that, can help the planning department also understand some of these questions that you're facing. We want to work as a team. So this is a new thing or a new old thing perhaps. But that's our hope.
Yeah, question related to that in terms of timeline, they obviously need to go back and, take our feedback and work on it before we can really provide further comments. So would it be that they would resubmit for planning and that's when we review, the ad hoc committee would meet with planning and potentially the applicant? Or is it, more informal, like before they resubmit?
Yeah, so just to clarify, there's no resubmittal for prelims. So once we do the study session, then the prelim is closed. So they could choose to file a new prelim before they file a formal application, but they would need to pay the fees for that. And we would offer a full board level study session if that is the case, because that's what the fees would cover. But we could also, as part of that, do the ad hoc, or, we could offer kind of, I think we'd have to think about the ad hoc support that's being provided prior to filing a formal application. Like, we want to work with them as much as possible, but there's also, if, to the extent that there's staff time involved in that, we need to recover those fees. And so we'd kind of have to work out the details of how that gets resolved. But I'm sure that there is a way we could figure that out if we wanted to, so.
I do not envision an ad hoc committee taking up any staff resources. This is something the applicant can reach directly to our committee, or staff can reach out to the committee as we feel, as they see fit. And it's up to the committee to decide how they see fit to do their task, which is to report back to the board what the status of the project is.
I think that staff would want some facilitation of that.
It's entirely up to you.
Coordination.
If you can help us with that, that's all the better.
Yeah, and you guys should be kept aware of the conversations going back and forth when they're happening.
Part of this is an effort to run around applicants, just reaching out to every member of the board, looking for, fishing for responses, which doesn't really help. You just get 5 separate, disparate sets of responses. We're all dancing around the Brown Act even more if we start to talk about this amongst ourselves. That's highly inappropriate. This way, only 2 of us are focused on this project, and the rest of us should not be engaging discussion, doing anything about it once it becomes a formal project.
So because this is an agendized discussion, can I make a suggestion that maybe we take this offline to and I can talk with management and talk with the chair about this, and then maybe when we come back for the next hearing, we can decide how this would work.
Do you see any harm in making an ad hoc committee appointment now, even if we don't have a task assigned? To my colleagues, are there any of us who are interested in being on this committee?
I would be very interested.
Yeah, I would too.
Yingshi, would you as well? Everybody's
We're-
interested.
everybody's interested.
We're all in.
I think if the applicant's really interested, I think we can work out for this time, we can assign something. My only concern is just how we're charging staff time, and maybe it's leaving this preliminary review application kind of open in some way to be able to charge that time before a formal comes in. But I think we could assign something and we can figure out how we're going to make that work.
Can we put the question back to the applicant? Do they feel like they have enough feedback that they can go forward with formal? Or do they want to come back for preliminary? Or I'm not offering the ad hoc or not, but what is there? Because I know like they already got the land purchased, they have a timeline to make it, get the school open and get out of the Menlo Park lease. So there's a lot in play.
Thank you. I mean, I think we would be very open to an ad hoc and understanding that, if staff time is charged, we would pay for that. I think we're going to have to huddle ourselves and decide, can we even go forward with the feedback that we've heard? And if we can't, then we wouldn't reach out for an ad hoc. We would sort of have to, who knows? Because I mean, some of the feedback we heard may actually just render this project completely infeasible, to be quite honest. I hope not, but it was a lot, and we heard it, and so we're going to have to sharpen our pencils. So if we do want to make some changes, I think the ad hoc is a great way to do that, to not have to spend money again on a new prelim, to be able to come back with some collaborative things that have been worked into a formal application, I think makes the most sense. So I think we would welcome whatever you can do today to appoint those folks so we're not losing time. And then we'll await kind of like the protocols that need to be put into place. And certainly we absolutely want the Brown Act respected and all of those things.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to hold off appointing an ad hoc committee for a few days. I would like to consult with the vice chair and staff, but we will make an appointment of 2 of us within a week for certain. And staff will notify you who those people are, and you are more than welcome to engage as you make your decisions on that. To my colleagues, everybody wants to do this. I'm excited and surprised. And so I guess it just warrants a little bit of thought. So, to the head of school, I have a question for you. You teach German and French.
Actually,
and
we teach through Chinese, through French, and through German. So in preschool, 80% of the day is classes that are taught through Chinese, through French, or through German. And then in elementary school, it's about 70-30 or 60-40. And in middle school, it's about 50-50.
Fantastic.
And so our students are fully bilingual.
And you are head of the entire school.
Yes.
Do you speak all these languages?
Speak French and English.
Fantastic.
No German.
Hats
No
off to you.
German,
It's a wonderful thing you're doing. So I appreciate that very much. Okay.
And if I can make one just final comment, I would just really, we do hope to see this project come back. And I really sincerely hope that this isn't such a discouragement and more as a motivation. There's a lot of good stuff here. And I just want to make that very clear. You can see that all 5 people want to be on this ad hoc for good reason. So just hopefully we will see you back. Thank you.
I second that comment, those comments just made, that we're very enthusiastic about this project. It looks like it would really be a big addition to the community. Be ashamed to lose it.
Thank you very much. This item is closed. We're going to move on and try to finish our agenda without taking a break. The next item is minutes from January 18th. Do we have any comments or a motion, please?
I move to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second.
Just to correct, it's the minutes from November 2nd,
Did I get the date wrong?
January 18th.
Oh, yeah, the draft minutes from November 2nd, 2023. Move to approve the minutes as written.
Okay, it's been moved and I'd like to offer a friendly amendment then on page 11. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th sentence, 6th line up from the bottom, all the way on the left side of the line. It says forward inhibited. It should move forward uninhibited, I believe is what it means to say.
And for clarity, this is page 11 of 23 on packet page 36.
This is Vice Chair Rosenberg's words, but I think you meant to say.
Yeah, that seems correct.
So I believe that's what you actually said.
That would be correct. Thank you for that. Thank you for catching that. I usually
So I suggest we
Worry my
make that
ass.
change if that's a friendly amendment.
that approved,
catch.
friendly amendment approved, second approves.
Sure.
Okay, so let's have a vote on that, please.
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Balte,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Okay, last item is board member questions, comments, and announcements. Does anybody have anything? If not, we are planning for our retreat at the end of February. Board member Vice Chair Rosenberg and I will be putting together an agenda for that and circulating that at some point. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.